Every morning at exactly 7:47, the same black Escalade roared across my front lawn, crushing the roses my late wife planted before cancer stole her breath. Dirt exploded through sprinklers, tire ruts sliced through the soil. The driver never slowed once while destroying the garden Sarah spent 2 years creating. The first time I ran outside screaming for her to stop, she rolled down the tinted window slowly and smiled like the destruction was entertainment. Cheryl Blackstone, vice president of Meadowbrook Heights HOA, adjusted her sunglasses and calmly informed me my lawn was now considered a community access path. According to her, emergency vehicle routes allowed temporary use of private land. Now, she claimed my corner lot made the perfect shortcut through the neighborhood. I explained carefully that my property had never been designated as an access road and her vehicle had just destroyed a memorial garden. She laughed softly and told me HOA authority overrode personal preferences when it benefited community safety and development plans. The next morning, she returned again, accelerating faster this time, tires ripping deeper scars across soil that still held Sarah's last planted roses. 47 mornings followed with identical cruelty, the same engine sound, the same destruction, and the same smirk behind dark sunglasses. Police reports went nowhere because Cheryl had already convinced the HOA board she possessed legal access authority for emergency route planning. My complaints during HOA meetings were dismissed politely while neighbors avoided eye contact, clearly afraid of becoming Cheryl's next target. By the 48th morning, something inside me stopped hoping the situation would resolve through polite conversation or official complaints. I stopped asking for help and started approaching the situation the way engineers solve persistent system failures. My name is Jake Brennan, retired aerospace systems engineer, after 4 decades designing flight control systems that prevented disasters thousands of feet above ground. Engineers believe every problem has a solution if you understand the variables, constraints, and the physics governing the environment. Sarah and I bought our corner property believing retirement here would bring quiet mornings, mountain air, and peaceful gardening after long working lives. She built that garden carefully using heirloom roses from her grandmother's farm in Ireland and native Colorado wildflowers chosen for seasonal harmony. Measured stone borders with aerospace precision, aligning each curve and irrigation pipe with the same patience used designing aircraft systems. Sarah used to tease me, saying I engineered gardens like I engineered airplanes, always calculating structure, balance, and long-term reliability. When cancer arrived, it changed everything about our carefully built life and our carefully planned retirement dreams. During her final months, Sarah still spent afternoons sketching garden layouts and writing notes about bloom patterns for future seasons. One sentence she wrote remained burned permanently into my memory long after her handwriting faded from the pages. "The garden should protect itself," she wrote beneath a drawing of roses, surrounded by stone borders and thick lavender. 2 years after she passed, I maintained that garden like a sacred project, honoring every hour she spent designing it. Each morning I watered the soil and checked the irrigation system while speaking quietly to Sarah, as if she still walked beside me. Hummingbirds still visited the feeders she placed between lavender rows, hovering above flowers like tiny guardians watching over her work. The garden remained peaceful until Cheryl Blackstone discovered my property's location beside the neighborhood's main entrance road. Cheryl had a reputation throughout Meadowbrook Heights for aggressively enforcing HOA rules while quietly pushing homeowners to sell valuable lots. Several neighbors whispered stories about intimidation tactics used to pressure elderly residents into selling below market value. My corner lot happened to be the most commercially valuable property bordering the community entrance. Developers would eventually want that land for retail construction once zoning changes arrived. Cheryl apparently decided forcing me out early would benefit certain future plans. That explained why her Escalade began crossing my lawn every morning exactly the same way. Monday morning, March 15th, she accelerated across my garden the first time, crushing freshly watered soil beneath 6,000 pounds of steel. I stood frozen, holding Sarah's copper watering can while tire tracks carved through rose beds like violent signatures across living artwork. The next day, I placed decorative river stones along the garden border, hoping physical boundaries might discourage her behavior. Tuesday at 7:47 a.m., Cheryl deliberately drove over every stone, grinding granite loudly beneath her expensive tires. She paused halfway across the garden, revved the engine twice, then crushed the oldest roses Sarah had planted years earlier. Those roses came from cuttings Sarah's grandmother carried from Ireland during the 1940s before immigrating to America. I knew exactly how long those plants took to mature because Sarah documented their growth like a scientist. 6 months of careful pruning and watering destroyed in seconds beneath Cheryl's SUV. That evening, I opened Sarah's old garden journal, flipping through pages filled with dried petals and careful handwritten notes. Pressed rose petals fell onto the kitchen table as I read her words again. County Cork survivors, she wrote beside those flowers, proud they still bloomed generations later. Apparently survival required stronger protection than simple garden fences. The following morning I installed professional security cameras across every corner of the property. Motion sensors activated recording whenever vehicles entered the garden area, capturing license plates, timestamps, and damage clearly. Within hours, Cheryl discovered the cameras and marched to my front door carrying printed HOA violation notices. She claimed the cameras violated emergency access laws and demanded immediate removal or daily fines would begin accumulating. I calmly told her every future action would be documented and reviewed by legal authorities. 3 days later, the HOA issued fines totaling $600 for refusing to remove surveillance equipment. Their attorney happened to be Cheryl's husband, which explained the sudden confidence behind their threats. That weekend, I began reviewing HOA bylaws with the same meticulous attention engineers give safety manuals. What I discovered changed the entire situation completely. 23 rule amendments had been added to the bylaws without the required homeowner voting procedures. Every fine issued during the past 8 years could potentially be invalid under state HOA governance laws. The entire enforcement system Cheryl relied upon rested on legally questionable foundations. Unfortunately, Cheryl had already escalated her strategy before learning, I understood the bylaws. Early Monday morning, bulldozers arrived, claiming authorization to remove hazardous vegetation blocking emergency access paths. Their machines destroyed Sarah's Japanese maple tree and cracked the granite memorial stone engraved with her name. I called the police immediately and waited beside the shattered stone until an officer arrived. Officer Martinez examined the damage quietly while reviewing the permits Cheryl's contractors claimed to possess. He leaned closer and spoke carefully so the contractors couldn't hear our conversation. Colorado property defense laws allowed homeowners to protect land from repeated vehicle threats under certain conditions. That night, I returned to my garage workshop and opened the engineering notebooks I hadn't touched since retirement. I began calculating kinetic energy forces generated by 6,000 pounds of accelerating SUV traveling across soft garden soil. Sarah's words echoed again from her journal about gardens protecting themselves. Engineers design systems that respond automatically when external forces exceed safe operational limits. I realized a garden could theoretically follow similar defensive principles. By midnight, I had drawn a simple mechanical design based entirely on physics rather than aggression. Hydraulic resistance combined with retractable ground anchors could create an immovable barrier without appearing threatening beforehand. The system would remain invisible until significant weight triggered the pressure sensors beneath the soil. Once activated, reinforced steel spikes would rise slowly but powerfully from underground housings. They would not harm anyone, but they would stop a 6,000-pound vehicle instantly. Over the next 2 days, I installed the mechanism carefully beneath fresh soil and replanted replacement roses above the housings. Everything looked peaceful again by Thursday evening when I finished calibrating the pressure sensors. Friday morning arrived with the same familiar engine sound approaching exactly at 7:47 a.m. Cheryl accelerated confidently across the lawn, clearly expecting another easy victory over the stubborn old widower. Escalade reached the center of the garden where Sarah's roses grew strongest. The pressure sensors triggered instantly beneath the weight of the vehicle. Hydraulic pistons activated, pushing reinforced spikes upward through hidden steel sleeves beneath the soil. The Escalade stopped violently as the spikes locked the frame against further movement. Cheryl stepped out screaming while neighbors gathered along sidewalks watching the unexpected spectacle. Police arrived minutes later responding to her frantic calls about sabotage and attempted property damage. Officer Martinez calmly inspected the installation while reviewing property defense regulations on his tablet. After several minutes, he looked up and informed Cheryl she had driven onto clearly marked private property again. My defensive system had not harmed anyone and remained entirely within legal boundaries protecting my land. The tow truck required 4 hours to safely remove her immobilized Escalade without causing further damage. During that time, dozens of neighbors quietly photographed the situation from their driveways. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting that evening after realizing the legal exposure surrounding Cheryl's actions. By midnight, Cheryl Blackstone had resigned from her HOA position under significant pressure from furious homeowners. The HOA officially recognized my property boundaries and issued a written apology for months of harassment. I rebuilt Sarah's garden slowly over the following weeks, planting new roses beside the surviving Irish cuttings. Hummingbirds returned again that summer, hovering above lavender exactly the way Sarah once described in her sketches. And every morning since then, the garden protects itself exactly the way she always believed it should.